Dr. Kim, looking into cats' nether regions is something you do on a regular basis. How common is it for cats to have problems related to their nutritional intake?
Uh, I don't see that much problem with nutritional intake. It's not my area, but there is a lot of cats with inflammatory bowel disease. And my personal theory is that the intake that they've got a problem with is actually the pollutant contaminants that we're surrounded with now, because they lick that off their coat. So a lot more cats are getting fur balls. And once a cat starts vomiting, it brings the bugs from the lower bowel to the upper bowel, and then they react to those. They become allergic to those bacteria, and that sets in train inflammatory bowel disease. The problem then being that the body thinks it can't be just, hair and contaminants, so it starts to react against individual proteins. So you end up on this search for protein that doesn't cause a problem. And in my experience, you can get a cat right with inflammatory bowel disease on, you can find a protein it doesn't react to, but eventually it will react to that one as well. It's an internal derangement, if you like. That cat I showed you also has inflammatory bowel disease. About 50% of ragdolls do, and they often lead on to lymphomas. So if you can get it right, you can extend the time before the gut gets cancerous.
Wow, that's incredible. I guess there are similarities between cats and humans. And now that I think about it, we're all surrounded by contaminants. So, what is the solution? Because our cats, we like to have them close to us. And so I guess we're all experiencing the contaminants, except we don't lick ourselves.
We don't, yeah, we only drink it, in the in the water, because it doesn't get, I mean, I start to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but you can't, they now talk about forever chemicals that are in people. They did a study to look to see how many people had one particular THP or something, and to see if it was affecting anything. And the problem was there was no one that didn't have it, so they didn't have a control group. So some people are more affected by it and have higher levels of it, but there's no control group. So I think humans are starting to enter the chain that the cats have had. So what do you do about? Well, we spend a lot of time washing cats. The stuff's nasty, and they're talking about what's in a wildfire and how toxic is all that. So mostly that'll show up as vomiting. One of the areas that I developed a significant amount of expertise in, as it were, was Squitty kitties. We used to home out cats and kittens, and in fact, we homed out 5,000 of them over a period of about 18 years. And I could tell by the smell what trees that they needed. Now, I'm not sure that that's a skill that can be passed on or that anybody wants passed on.
I think so. I think so. No one wants to send their kitty straight to the kitty litter tray. As long as they actually make it to the tray, it's probably a good thing. But squitty kitties, and this is common.
Oh, 80-90% of kittens. And if it's not addressed properly, I used to think cats could grow out of it. But in fact, they can't. And I've treated cats, 2-3 years old, the owners have heroically put up with leaky bums and, having to wipe their bums, and stinky poos that clear the room. And, it's no fun for the cat either, because they do feel obliged to, tidy up down there. Here's an interesting factoid. I did once ask, how come dogs, with their sensitive noses and taste, how could they lick their own bums? And apparently they can switch their smell off, so they can lick a bum and eat horse poo, cow poo or whatever. They can switch it off. So cats must do the same as well in order to be able to tidy up. So interesting you say that poo and pee are related, because I've had a couple of cats where inflammatory bowel disease was actually the cause of their peeing outside the tray. Now, peeing outside the tray, we've discussed before, is always a message, never a mistake. and it was just because the whole pelvic area was inflamed, and so they were just looking for relief, and they, that pee outside. Once we fixed up the inflammatory bowel disease, they went back to peeing in the tray.
You mentioned before you don't sort of necessarily concentrate on nutrition and all the rest of it, but obviously you know something about it. Little things like giving a cat milk or giving a cat human food. What are some of the no-nos with all that?
I prefer to recommend cream. It's low lactose anyway. Much better. Cats can digest fat a lot better. Yogurt's always a good thing. We should all be eating yogurt. Probiotics have now been developed specifically for cats and dogs. My nutritional intervention in terms of Squitty kitties as well, because they see them all ages and it can be complex to track down the parasites. There are some good tests, but if the test is negative, interestingly, it doesn't mean the cat doesn't have it. Cats are a bit like that. If it's positive, then you know which direction you're going. And there are 7 things that cause Squitty kitties if you send a sample off to the lab for what's called a PCR test, and a polymerase chain reaction. And this one little kitten had all 7. So my only nutritional test is if you've got a cat with soft poos, feed them chicken and yogurt for 3 days. And if the poo's still stinky and soft, then you've got a colon irritant or small bowel irritant that's creating the problem. And so we can then start to look for parasites and that sort of stuff, because chicken and yogurt is essentially 100% digested. I mean, the yogurt's low lactose. It's called lactobacillus for that reason. And so that's the only diagnostic test I do. If they've still got soft poos after 3 days of chicken and yogurt, then worthwhile grabbing a sample and sending it off, or starting some of the diagnostic treatments, because of course lab tests are not cheap. So sometimes it's easier to trial a treatment rather than look for something that may, negative doesn't mean it isn't there. So
that's complicated. And for cats that actually are outdoors, I guess it's and hide their poos, it's a bit hard to monitor what their output is. Are there any other telltale signs that, do they bite and lick
they're
and
farty.
themselves? Oh,
They're farty. Some of them will rub their bums and leave a skid mark. But mostly if you've got a problem, they'll be farty. So if they're a totally outdoor cat, you'll never know. I have had outdoor cats that have been in hospital and, demonstrated the problem. You've got to differentiate that from cats who when they're worried. But it tends to, if they're in hospital and not moving much and they've got soft poos, then you've got an issue that you need to look into. So yes, outdoor cats, but outdoor cats are not the ones that get brought to the vet. And also I think that up until 25 years ago, cats were fed really rubbish. I mean, the old Friskies was all, you might have to take the old dry foods were terrible. They were just awful. And of course, cats would go and catch mice and rabbits and things. We forget it. Yeah, and possums. I think there are micronutrients in mice, and I really think until we start, there's a mouse plague. How come we can't capture them and put them through nitrogen, liquid nitrogen, and they come out like little divers, and then you can put them in a sardine tin? That's my solution to nutrition. Until we do that, we're missing the micronutrients.
Wow, mouse in a can. Who'd have thought it?
Yeah. I've talked to the big companies, and one of them did actually put little mouse flavored tidbits in one of their dry food, but it didn't take off. They called it mouse flavored. I don't know if they were actually mice or not. And nobody knows how much fiber there is in a mouse coat, soluble versus insoluble. So we still don't know the answer to what's the perfect fiber combination for cats.
Well, maybe the people that provide the food for pet snakes, because they can get humanely raised and prepared mice for their snakes, so
Yeah.
maybe people could get them for their cats.
I have had one client do that. They're about $3 per small rat, and the only correlation between good teeth and what you feed them is feeding rats. That's from old studies, but it's actually the chewing action, and chicken bones and things don't really do it. It has to be rats for some reason and go to woe. So, because your teeth, and here I am being a heretic again, but you're either born with good teeth or you're not. It depends on your genetics and your mother, how your mother was fed. So all this fannying about with special diets and dentals and stuff, experience, it does not work. Brushing cats' teeth doesn't work. I'm waiting for the actual evidence, and I can't get any of the dentists to show me any evidence that brushing a cat's teeth or scaling or polishing every year does any good at all. So anyway, I'm still out there in the I'm not quite on this planet, but there we go.
Yeah. You have a good long time reputation as being someone who speaks their mind, which is fantastic.
I ran into a problem with my sister-in-law, because she didn't realize that I do actually say what I think, as long as it's true. I forget how to fib.
Yep,
Sure.
that's not such a bad thing. Dr. Kim Kendall from Cat Palace in Sydney, thank you so much for being with us on the Poocast podcast.
I'm always interested in the variations on a theme that cats provide.